The bottom line is, if you're not sure of, what steps to take and like what to do next, just take a fiver. Just take a fiver, relax, come back to the project later, but don't rush it. Don't rush it.
Everybody wanna take control, wanna take my money, try and steal my soul. I'll be the one to let you know.
As promised, today we are going to wire an LS swap. Stopping point yesterday was good. We got a ton done. I got to get the intake manifold back on, a couple other bits and pieces back inside the engine bay before we start wiring, just so that when you lay the wires out, they're where they need to be. You don't have to go back and trim and move and cut and tuck. Going to hit this shock tower with a little rattle can too, make sure it fits the overall scheme of the car, which is, well, So we're going to get this thing back to a wireable state. So intake goes back on. I'm going to put the downpipe back on eventually, just to make sure that whenever I run wires on the passenger side, they stay away from heat. Clean up the valve covers, get those on, coil packs on, etc., etc. For the money, the LS6 intake is an awesome piece. It performs very, very, very well for a stock unit. However, remember, these are 20 years old about. So when you pick one up, at bare minimum, replace the intake manifold gaskets. These are just all flattened out. And when you crank these things down, like a lot of people do, to 50 foot-pounds, these things will always squish flat and you will not get a good seal. So buy new gaskets. Right, intake manifold is cleaned up and on, new gaskets, all that stuff's freshened up. Now we get to run the harness, which is so much fun. So when you're doing an engine swap, an LS engine swap on your vehicle, there's a few key pieces of information that you need to know about the engine that you're swapping into your car. It's all super simple and straightforward stuff. Number one, what reluctor wheel are you running on the crank? There's either a 24X or a 58X. 24X is super common up until 06, 07. After that, the 58X is super common. There's some weird year Saab trucks and GTOs I know are weird that have a 24X wheel, but they're 58X year. But just ensure that you know what reluctor wheel you have. Then make sure you know where your camshaft sensor is. If it's a Gen 3 LS, they're in the rear of the valley cover. So at the back of the block by the oil pressure sending unit. That's a Gen 3, it's a rear cam sensor. If you have a Gen 4, it's a 4-pole cam sensor and it's on the front of the valley cover. If you're using a Gen 3 ECU and harness, you can't use a 4-pole cam position sensor like the cam gear with the 4 poles on it. You have to use a single pole cam gear. That is if you're using stock ECU. If you're using aftermarket ECU, you can mix and match a bunch of different sensors front and rear. Then you need to know if you're going to run drive-by cable or drive-by wire. They're very different. Gen 4 stuff has drive-by-wire if you'd like it, but you can also run drive-by cable if you wish. It's a little bit more of a pain in the butt, but for this application, I'm drive-by cable, so I have no worries. And finally, another key piece of information is what transmission are you running? If you're running a TH400 or a T56, pretty much any manually shifted automatic, like reverse manual valve body 400, 350, glide, or a T56, you don't need transmission control on your harness. You can just use the T56 harness, which is also cheaper than the harnesses that come with transmission control. Some harnesses will come with injector connectors that are EV1 and you need EV6, or if you need EV6 and you have EV1, Brian Tooley Racing stocks EV1 to EV6 connectors. You can always snip and solder in new injector connectors if you, for some reason, have the wrong injector clips, or you go to a different set of injectors down the road. It's not hard, 2 wires, easy to do. I say that, but don't use like house ties and stuff to wire them in. Little unboxing here. Made in the USA, which is awesome. This is what I like about BP. Everything they sell comes with an electrical test report. Passed, obviously, they do their due diligence to make sure that the continuity is where it needs to be. Please read the ink. I don't need to, I'll figure it out. And you have the mothership with its own built-in fuse box, so you don't have to tap into everything on the chassis. Pre-terminated, unterminated wires as well. You have your OBD2 harness. Everything is labeled, so it's plug and play. This is a game changer for this car, that's for sure. We're gonna kick off the harness installation by feeding the largest part through first, which is gonna be your ECU connectors. The nice thing about this harness is it has its own fuse box with an extension on it, so you can mount the fuse box in the relay center away from the ECU, somewhere tucked in the engine bay, nice. And then we have our unterminated wires that we can fish through as well for, ignition switched on, main power, fuel pumps, so on and so forth. So I'm gonna start feeding it through this hole. I'll talk to you soon. So this whole fishing these wires through the firewall was a little more difficult than I anticipated. The S13 behind this grommet has the heater core, the blower motor, one of the two. I've never taken an S13 dash out, but the blower motor is right behind that grommet. So when you feed the connectors through here, they bottom out. You got to just kind of wiggle them through. And long story short, it was a pain in the butt. But they're in there. I have my fuse box in the engine bay like I like. There's a rubber grommet, so this stuff won't get cut on. And we're in good shape. We have the harness kind of routed where it needs to end up. You got your bank 2 stuff over here. Generally speaking, as soon as I get the harness through the firewall, the first thing I start with is I look for bank 2 and I look for bank 1 coils. On the BP harness, the stuff is labeled. So obviously driver side is bank 1 on an LS, passenger side is bank 2. So when I start with the coils, the rest of their harness basically falls in line where it needs to be. I have to modify this one a little bit. I cut off the air conditioning stuff, and then the MAP sensor, or I'm sorry, the mass airflow sensor I'm not going to be using, so that gets cut off as well. I save all the pigtails just in case. If you ever need to wire any of that stuff back in, do not throw the stuff out, save it. I have to extend the alternator just a smidge to reach over here. And then once I'm done with the engine bay side of things, I can go into the inside of the car. But like I said, the BP harness pretty much falls in line. Throttle position sensor, idle air control valve, your coolant pressure sensor, injector for cylinder 1, 3, 5, 7, your coil pack harness. The rear, you have your cam, knock sensor, you have a vehicle speed harness that's dropped down by the floor over there, so on and so forth. Once you get everything happy in the engine bay, you have an unterminated group of wires on the inside of the cabin. These are super straightforward. The first of which, switch 12-volt ignition. So run to your ignition on, your key on. You got this gray wire. It's super long. That goes all the way to your fuel pump relay as a trigger. Green wire and the blue wire, these are both coolant fan triggers. They're ground triggered relays. So you use this to connect the ground side of whatever relay you're using for your coolant fan. And then on the inside of the car, you have speedo, you have tach, you have check engine light, and then you have one other one. Let me see here. Maybe just speedo, tach, and check engine light. But either way, there's not a ton of unterminated wires, and getting those buttoned up, it's just a little bit of work, more work than I'm sure you want to watch right now, but I'll do a tutorial on that coming up. And the other thing, when you watch the videos of me working on this car, I'm not throwing shade at the person that built it. I actually think that more people that get out and buy stuff like this and attempt to swap stuff and attempt to wire stuff, attempt to build stuff, the more the merrier. If you don't have the tools to do things exactly right the first time, or if you don't have the knowledge you need to make sure things run properly off the bat, experience is the best tool you could have. Obviously, learn as much as you can reading and watching even YouTube videos. Not mine, obviously, because mine suck. But I respect the fact that someone goes out there and tries to do it, because there's a lot of people that just bench race. They sit on their computers, they get on LSX forums, and they just talk crap, and they don't actually do anything. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed on this car, but there's an engine in it, there's a transmission in it, rear end in it, and a lot of the miscellaneous stuff is done. It just needs a lot of cleanup and a lot of fine tuning here and there. So again, I'm not throwing shade at anybody. If you're trying to build a car like this, don't let something like this deter you. Just off the bat, try to tweak here and there things to, I started feeling pretty sick, so I myself took a break, and my girlfriend's out of town. She's got all these scented things for the bathtub, so I figured I'd give it a whirl. Right now I'm using White Lily. It's supposed to help with, I don't know, it just says aromatherapy. I needed a lot of therapy. So this is a start.
I'm tired.